Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
My name is James.
And my name's Attiba.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 4, Episode 10, Homefront, Part 1. This episode aired January 1st, apparently, 1996. When did they show shows on the 1st of January?
This was a very important one.
Apparently so. Do you want to introduce our guest, James?
On this week's episode, we have 50% of the Teebs and Kid Phoenix versus podcast, Attiba Royster.
Yes, hello everyone. I hope you're all listening to the podcast and enjoying it as much as this one, which I know is not really possible, but...
No, of course not.
Seriously, I advise people to listen to the Teebs and Kid Phoenix podcast. I have been crying with laughter at some of the episodes. It's great interaction between Teebs and Kid Phoenix, who do not see eye to eye on nerd culture.
Despite being siblings.
Yes, we are siblings and we do not see eye to eye. In fact, many times we see eye to toe. I don't know. However that works. Very long-time fan of DS9, just to get my bona fides in.
And I see that you're wearing a red shirt with a Star Trek logo on it.
That is correct. I am wearing a red shirt. So number one, I hope I don't get whacked during the course of this episode.
Wow.
But also...
Me too.
I would just like to point out that the only reason red shirts die so often is because red shirts and gold shirts later actually do stuff. They're not up in the command center eating pies and telling everyone else what to do like gold shirts.
Right.
And they're not in their labs just pouring
They're beaming
over.
Down.
They're in there getting it done. Whenever you need somebody to build you a warp reactor out of some macaroni and glue, it falls to, shoestring. Falls to one of the red shirts.
Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way. Well, before we start talking about Homefront, anything to say about the previous podcast, James?
It was perfect.
I'm going to have to take James' word for that.
Well, since you haven't heard the podcast yet, Attiba, anything to say about the episode, which was our man Bashir?
It's up and down. There's stuff to like. There's stuff to not like.
Oh, yeah. That's how James felt about it.
Yes.
It is fun.
Yeah, there was more humor in it than I expected. I can be a curmudgeon sometimes about some of the things that go on this show, but I enjoyed it. Okay, so let's talk about Homefront. In the cold open, Sisko and Dax are discussing that the wormhole has been opening and closing randomly. There seems to be no explanation for it, as there are no ships coming through or unusual readings. Dax suggests that maybe the Bajorans are right, and the prophets are trying to tell them something. Sisko says, well, that's what's going on. They didn't tell me. I thought that was funny.
Well, they're being a little bit obvious if they're trying to tell something. We've seen with the prophets in the past, it has to be cryptic, and you have to figure out what they mean.
That's true.
Opening and closing the wormhole, far too obvious.
Yeah, very on point, I guess. Are we really not concerned that there are cloaked ships coming through and that we're being invaded? I'm so surprised that we just went, we don't know what's happening. It's probably nothing.
Especially with Dax.
When Dax sees Odo, she says, oh, here we go, with kind of a smirk. And then she acts all innocent when Sisko asks her what that's about. We don't find out right now what that's about, because Worf calls with a priority message from Starfleet security. Now we go to Quark's, and Quark is telling some kind of joke to Morn, who doesn't appear to get it, when Odo starts yelling at Quark, asking where Dax is. He accuses Quark and Dax of moving his furniture. He says this is the 4th time in the past year that Dax has done this. She breaks into his quarters while he's regenerating and moves everything just slightly. He says Dax knows that everything in his quarters is painstakingly placed, yet she takes some kind of weird pleasure in throwing his quarters into chaos. He says humanoids have no sense of order, and Dax is the most humanoid person he knows. He's very annoyed, and I have to say none of this makes any sense. And then Sisko calls and asks him to come to ops.
Okay, this continues my theory that at heart, Dax, and possibly all Trills, are basically complete jerks. Like when she drags Kira to the holosuites when she knows it's not something that she likes.
Yeah, it keeps dragging her there.
She is a toxic friend.
Okay. I have to agree with James here. Okay. So one time is a practical joke. Okay. Twice, maybe the joke is good. This is the 4th time this year. Like at that point, you're just torturing the guy. You're just being a jerk and like are getting some kind of sick thrill from this whole situation. So
yeah. I mean, no, I agree. One time might have been funny, but 4 times makes no sense. And also, there are people that you just don't pull practical jokes on just because you think it's funny. You know, if they get super upset, that's not a good thing to keep doing. That's not a good team member.
One of the things that we know about Odo at this point is that everything else is so chaotic that having some form of stability or order in his life is like very important to him. Just like feeling, I don't know, being able to relax or whatever. And like, it's the equivalent of somebody blasting rock music in your windows at all hours of the night. Like,
yeah.
Well, and also he's never had his own space before. And, you know, they made a big deal about it when he finally got quarters and how much it meant to him and also how protective he was. Like, he wouldn't let anybody in. Kira was the first person he let in. And so now she's in there messing with it. That's just not nice.
Yeah, agreed. And the second thing in this one is, I think Quark should have said maybe something like, ease off with the speciesism.
When he just said everything about humanoids? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Hold on there, Odo. Changelings have no sense of morality, empathy, justice, decency. Perhaps your people not committing genocide or war crimes. You know, just saying.
Also, the Vulcans are standing over here wondering who doesn't have a sense of order.
Oh.
That's a really good point.
I think what they meant about chaos was that they just weren't in charge of everything and controlling everything.
Oh, yes.
So in Ops, we learned that there was an explosion at a diplomatic conference on Earth, killing 27 people. They show a video recording of the room at the moment of the explosion, and when they slow it down, it appears that a piece of pottery in the room is actually a changeling. Worf says there were no remains of a changeling in the room, so they assume that it escaped unharmed. Sisko says he was hoping this would never happen, but it appears that the changelings have reached Earth. And we cue the theme song.
And is anybody surprised?
No, why would they think that this would never happen when we've already heard that they were everywhere? I mean, did you think everywhere but Earth?
Yeah, there was one highly placed in the Romulan intelligence service. So the probability there's going to be at least one in Starfleet is a little bit high.
And what was that thing we talked about on the episode that you were here for, Attiba, where the changeling said something about, oh, the Klingons and the Federation, they're not going to be a problem anymore. Weren't they telling us that something's going on there?
Well, they were heavily implying and intimating, but they weren't outright explicitly saying.
Well, that's true.
Clearly, things were in the works.
Yeah, things were in the works. It was at least an indication.
Well, maybe it's because Deep Space Nine is like 2 weeks or 3 weeks of travel away. They thought that the changelings would just go, it's far too far.
Oh, it's way too far. Yeah, we'll never get there.
I would just liken it to when the pandemic began. I don't know if you remember, but it was in like two places. It was in like New York and Seattle, and it was like, oh, it'll be fine. I'll be fine. It didn't become real until it was like in your town or in your area, or I figure it's a similar situation where you're like, it'll be fine. They're not going to make it to Earth until they make it to Earth. And you're like, whoops. Oh,
yeah.
We really need to pay attention to this now.
Well, and we've seen that the Federation often behaves like the appeasement governments in the 1930s. That, oh, it'll be fine. So that head in the sand approach does seem to be a Federation standard.
Well, I just think that the Federation and Starfleet has a we don't preempt attitude towards like everything. Like everything they do is reactionary. Like no matter what it is.
Yeah, there's a real lack of strategy.
Good point. Yeah, because it might upset someone.
Exactly.
Well, Dax is now in Odo's quarters, putting everything back to the way he likes it. He makes her promise to stay out of his quarters. And then they talk about how he's going to Earth with Sisko to help Starfleet with info about the changelings. Then we go to Sisko talking to his dad on FaceTime. He tells his dad that even though they're coming to Earth, it's not exactly a vacation, and he'll be spending most of his time in San Francisco. His dad tells him that's fine as long as he's in New Orleans for dinner, so he doesn't have to eat replicated slop. I love that line. I don't know. I had to write that down. It was too funny. Then he asks how his dad is feeling since his surgery on his heart, and his dad avoids the question and kind of makes a joke. After he hangs up, Jake comes in and he calls him Jaco, which kills me every time. Jake asks if his dad told Grandpa Joe that they aren't going to stay with him. Sisko is like, it didn't come up. Nobody wants to tell their parents that. It's very relatable.
That was so real, yeah.
Yeah. Jake is annoyed because he doesn't want to be chopping vegetables 9 hours a day since this is his vacation.
I think we get the first hint here that his father isn't in 100% health and is doing that aging parent thing of, I'm fine.
Yeah, everything's fine. Are we going to ask the obvious question here of how you get wait staff in the future when there's no money? Are we just going to pretend like that's not weird, that he has waiters and people working for him when there's no money?
We'll just gloss over that bit.
Maybe it's their truest joy in life to wait tables. You don't know.
That could be.
I don't know. And
it might be a different experience if people aren't so jerky.
That's true.
And if it's never about money and people aren't paying, but people will still be entitled. That's never going to change.
No.
Maybe these people are more evolved.
That you're supposed to believe that, yes.
That is a good question, though.
Who's washing the dishes? I don't know.
There's probably a load of Ferengi running it in the back room. So, is anybody going to bring up the fact that this is what happened to Admiral Cartwright?
Stop.
I was going to bring up that Sisko's dad is played by Brock Peters, who had a very long career. He has a number of credits in all of the decades starting from the 60s. So in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. In terms of Trek, yes, he was Admiral Cartwright in Star Trek 4 and 6. And he was also in the original Battlestar Galactica in 1979. It's a very interesting actor.
Well, I have a theory here. After he got kicked out of Starfleet, he changed his name and then opened this Cajun restaurant.
I see. So he must have had Sisko, though, before? I'd have to look up the timing of that. It's quite a bit later.
Are we going to have to go through another one of these story times when Susan Gibney shows up again later?
Uh-huh. It's in my notes.
I think this just proves my theory that all of DS9 is just a holodeck simulation. Because they're just running out of NPCs and they're just recycling guys.
Oh, wow.
So, no, I don't know. That's something I just said right now.
Well, now Miles and Julian come out of the holosuite dressed as pilots from World War II and the Battle of Britain. They say their hearts really aren't in the battle today because they're worried about what's happening on Earth, and they don't think Quark can understand. Quark says something stupid about Ferenginar and also about how humans only think about themselves, which is rich coming from him.
Oh, but you gotta love Miles's Brit accent, eh?
Yeah, what is with that weird accent?
It's truly Dick Van Dyke quality.
They see Odo, and Miles asks him to check on his parents in Dublin when he's on Earth. Odo agrees, but isn't sure a changeling will be welcome. Miles doesn't think anyone will hold him responsible for what his people are doing. I thought that was hilarious. I mean, has Miles never met any humans before?
They're more evolved.
Yeah. They wish Odo luck, and he says he doesn't believe in luck, but he appreciates the sentiment. This was one of my favorite moments of Odo, really thus far in the entire series.
Yeah.
This shows how much he's really learned about working with other races, since the beginning of the show. Can you imagine him saying that in season 1? Forget it. He never would have said anything like that.
I think this is, again, the difference of Odo and his people. Odo is actually having understanding for empathy. And he's understanding the sentiment that Miles is giving him by saying, good luck.
I haven't thought about that because there's another scene in this episode where I find him to be quite evolved. And I hadn't thought about the fact that they were trying to show the contrast between him and his people. Yeah, that's pretty good analysis. Now we go to Ops as Kira is a little sad that the random wormhole openings seem to have stopped. She was hoping that the prophets were finally going to show themselves to her people.
Wouldn't that completely destroy faith if the prophets reveal themselves to actually be real? Part of the Bajoran religion is faith in the prophets within the wormhole. So if they reveal themselves, boom, that whole aspect of the religion is gone.
Like, faith in what? Faith in the fact that they exist, or faith in the fact that they're going to help you through life?
Yeah.
They exist.
Okay. Wouldn't the wormhole prove that?
And the orbs also kind of prove that.
Right. Well, except they're just migraine triggers. But are you saying that if something were proven true in any kind of a religion, that it would destroy the religion?
It would destroy the faith aspect.
Except just in that one thing. There's still other things that you have faith in, I guess.
Well, there's other aspects of the Bajoran religion. I mean, it wouldn't affect that. But the belief that the prophets are real and actually live in the wormhole and having faith that they're there would evaporate because you'd have proof. It's like, it's not a question of faith anymore. It's a question of they're there.
Okay. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. It would change the religion for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Worf says he prefers Klingon beliefs. He says, our gods are dead. Ancient warriors slew them a millennia ago. They were more trouble than they're worth. Kira says she doesn't think she'll ever understand Klingons, and Miles says don't worry about it. Nobody does, and that's the way they like it. And everyone laughs while Worf looks confused.
Yeah, the way they do that cut of Worf reacting, I feel he wanted to say at that point, no, seriously, that's what happened. We slew them.
Yeah, it's not a allegory. It's a thing that happened.
I have the feeling that the Klingons are a lot more literal than we've been led to believe.
Could be. I took some leadership notes in this scene. If Worf is trying to be a better leader, he's trying to learn about command. Maybe when you're doing that, you don't say something like, I prefer the beliefs of my own people to yours. Just kind of dismiss everything.
Wait a minute. Wait a second then. Then we do have to go back to what Miles and Bashir were talking with Quark. Because if you're talking about diversity of belief and trying to take everybody's belief and culture into account, when Quark is talking about, the great crash that happened and how all of his accounts were in trouble, to him, to a Ferengi, that is just as powerful as people dying over the English Channel.
Totally different thing that I'm talking about.
Okay.
First of all, the Ferengi are pigs, and I don't care about them. So that's part one. But part two, I'm very specifically talking about how Worf is trying to earn the red uniform. And he said something about that in The Way of the Warrior, where he had a lot to learn. And there was a whole little side story kind of about that, where he was learning how to talk to people and how to get the most out of people. So I'm talking specifically about trying to be a leader. Those guys were just talking in a bar. They can talk about whatever they want. So I'm being very specific to the situation.
Okay.
Like if he wants to get the most out of Kira, who now I assume reports to him, he needs to maybe just behave a little bit differently. That's what I meant.
Your beliefs are invalid.
The Bajorans are stupid. That's what I heard him say.
Ow.
Sorry, this is just my everyday as I have to deal with things like this about the best way to say something to get the most out of people. Now we go to Starfleet headquarters where we meet Admiral Leyton and his adjunct, Commander Benteen, who looks an awful lot like Dr. Leia Brahms from Next Gen. And this Admiral guy, too, he'll never be anybody other than Chase from Falcon Crest to me. Though I never cared about Chase. I always liked Richard. But I digress. Leyton and Sisko worked together on the Okinawa, and we learned that Leyton recommended Sisko for this DS9 job. And I thought, was he trying to get rid of Sisko, or was this supposed to be a good thing? Who knows?
I'm picturing Kim writing in her notes. So this guy stuck Sisko on a crap hole strip mall.
Yes, I'm very suspicious of his motives right away. Why did you send me there? Odo sympathizes with their situation on Earth, saying uncovering changeling infiltrators isn't easy. Leyton says Earth is in danger and something needs to be done. Since Sisko knows more than anyone else about the Dominion, he's now acting head of Starfleet security. I put in my notes, congratulations, Falcon Crest has given you another crappy job. Now we go to the Sisko restaurant, which is hopping with customers. Grandpa Joe says he hasn't seen people so nervous since the Borg. He says he'd like to meet Odo, but he's a little suspicious of anyone who doesn't eat. But Odo decided to stay at Starfleet headquarters and not upset people out in the general public. And then they start picking on Joe about his health, but he's not really interested in talking about this particular topic. Grandpa Joe is glad that his son is on the shapeshifter case. And then in comes Nog in his cadet uniform. He frequents Grandpa Joe's restaurant because it's the only place on the planet with live tube grubs. Jake asks about the academy and Nog says, it's really just school, but he's doing okay. But you know that something is up with him.
And Nog eating the tube grub seems to put Sisko off his food.
Yeah, that's right. He can't eat the gumbo anymore.
I already like Sisko's dad because of the bread pudding.
Yeah, he tells people not to bother reading the menu, just to order the bread pudding. Yeah.
And when he says he's not seen people this nervous since the Borg scare, my first thought was, don't get comfortable, there's another one coming in 11 months.
Oh, because this is before First Contact, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
First Contact was released in November.
Well, yeah, this is just getting them prepared for that. Later, when Jake and Nog are alone, Nog admits that he's having trouble getting in with the upperclassmen. He says it's not just him, but others are having the same trouble, so it's not just because he's a Ferengi. He says there's a group of students called Red Squad that get special training, and they won't even talk to him. Which, I don't know, that sounds like school to me. But I also thought, here, are they the founders? I thought everybody was a changeling. The two of them have a sweet little scene here, but I was pretty sure they were trying to tell me something. Now Sisko and Admiral Falcon Crest go to see the President of the Federation.
That's what you've named him?
Yes. They want permission to start doing blood screenings and phaser sweeps, but the president doesn't want to disrupt the population. He thinks the threat isn't as bad as everyone else thinks. He's like, there was only one changeling on Earth, and he's probably gone now. It's like, okay, dude.
Yeah.
Who elected this clown? The president thinks Sisko is just being paranoid, and at that moment, the suitcase that Sisko walked in with morphs into Odo, startling the president. Odo says, forgive the intrusion, but you can see Starfleet should be concerned. Effective entrance, the president says.
I like the little touch when he jumps up and he like stands behind the chair between him and Odo.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, nice. Run away.
Yeah, whoops. Sisko and Falcon Crest are like, Odo could have killed you, or worse, replaced you. They're just asking to increase security at the Starfleet and Federation installations. Blood tests are only for high-ranking officials and their family members. The average citizen won't be bothered. The president reluctantly agrees. I suppose this might seem like overkill to him, but really only if there hadn't been that explosion that killed a bunch of people, because they said nothing like that had happened for 100 years on Earth. So how do you just dismiss it as not a big deal?
Right. You already know that in their expansionist agenda, the founders are very aggressive. How do you not take that seriously?
I would argue that at this point, do you really know that the changelings have an aggressive expansionist agenda? At this point, they haven't really done anything. They just kind of been on their side of the wormhole, poking. Not even that. Like, just the threat of them has set off the Cardassians and the Klingons. The Cardassians and the Romulans went into the Gamma Quadrant preemptively.
They tried to start a war in the last episode of the previous season.
Yeah.
Between the Federation and whatever that alien race was. I can't remember.
Oh, that's right. The adversary.
Yep.
Okay.
But that's really the worst thing they've done. You are correct. Yeah. They're more afraid of them. Yeah.
Their style is not, we're going to get in there and just mess up everything and then bring in our army. Their style is more like...
It's more insidious.
We're going to make you go nuts looking for us.
It's much more insidious. It's more like we're going to infiltrate and slowly take over, and then you're going to look up and we'll be everywhere. We'll have taken over everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if they looked at some of the things that the Jem'Hadar had done, the very first, I think it was the first hint that we had of any of that was way, way back in Sanctuary with the Flaky Skin People, where they talked about how their home had been invaded and they had essentially wiped out all of the other people, right? Whatever that other race was on their planet.
Yeah.
So it's not as if we don't have a little bit of evidence that they can be quite aggressive, but they haven't done anything like that yet on this side of the wormhole.
So yeah, I think my point is at this point, they're still just kind of a lingering threat.
Yeah.
It's not crazy that someone would dismiss them offhand as being like rumor or whatever.
Gotcha.
Okay, yeah, I understand that. Yeah, it's also not crazy that people would be super paranoid about them because they could be anywhere and you can't see them. Right. Yeah, which is a different kind of fear. Yeah.
But working on the principle that there's a lot of bluff here rather than actual real physical threat.
And if we didn't happen to be following the crew that was standing right next to the wormhole, we might have a different perspective.
But don't forget about the explosion. Somebody did kill 27 people. Right. So that did happen.
Right.
Now we're testing the phaser sweeps on Odo, which is awfully nice of him to allow. They agree on a setting that's painful to Odo, and Sisko says to install them in every room at headquarters and on the orbital stations.
Odo does point out that the adjunct thanked Sisko, but didn't thank him. And he'd been the one that had been shot 13 times that day.
That's true. He did make that point. But also, Sisko is a higher ranking person, so she may have just been sucking up.
Oh, yeah. Eddington proves that is an effective way of going up the ranks in Starfleet.
That's true. Then Nog appears to speak to Sisko in private. Sisko seems annoyed, but agrees, even though he's like, I'm busy. I thought that was pretty funny. He heard about Nog's trouble from Jake, and Sisko reminds Nog that they both knew Starfleet Academy was going to be difficult for him. Nog says he intends to stick with it, but he wants Sisko's help to join Red Squad, which is something Sisko hasn't even heard of. Nog says they're an elite squad, the best of the best, and they get special treatment. And I'm 100% confident that James has something to say about this.
Oh, you mean within Starfleet's classist clique, there's a super clique of the elite of the elite.
Yes. Unless they're changelings and they're trying to make it worse. They're trying to add some strife in the schools.
That's a really good point.
I hate to bring this up, but given what we find out in the next episode.
I'm with Attiba there.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know what it is.
I'm biting my tongue.
Yeah.
Look, kids are jerks, and they form cliques, and that's what happens.
That's what happens.
Yeah. Nog does say that he has the grades to qualify, but he needs a high-ranking sponsor. Of course. Sisko sighs, but he says that he'll do what he can.
I think Sisko has a soft spot for Nog.
Well, he's just nice, and he's Jake's friend. Like, would he be so nice to him if he wasn't Jake's friend? I don't know.
Come on. Nog is the son Sisko always wanted.
Oh!
Remember, early on, Sisko was really gung-ho about Jake going into the academy.
Oh, because he's going to the academy. Okay.
Well, I wonder if part of this is Sisko understanding that Nog is that link between Ferengi society and not just humans, but the Federation as a whole. Nog really is different from the rest of the Ferengis.
Nog is a representation of the ideals that, like, Starfleet is supposed to stand for. Like, we are so awesome and great that people will just want to be a part of us just because of how awesome we are.
You've brought that up before in the past. Of why wouldn't you want to be us? Kim seems unconvinced.
You mean like when Nog was calling the girl stupid and nobody told him why that was a bad idea? We want that to be part of Starfleet?
No. What we're saying is Starfleet can even redeem dudes like that. Like, we are so great, we can actually even take these totally garish, disgusting lumps of clay and mold them into fine, upstanding members of the galaxy.
Look how great we are.
After Janeway beat him with a stick a few times.
Well, we go back to the restaurant, and Grandpa Joe is complaining about not seeing his son very much. Sisko complains that it's not like his dad's ever come to the station to visit them. Sisko's pretty annoyed with his dad because he talked to his doctor and he learned that Grandpa Joe hasn't been to the doctor for 8 months. Grandpa Joe says, "That man's an idiot," which I laughed out loud. That's so relatable coming from your dad. Anyway, we learn he has progressive atherosclerosis and he needs vascular regeneration therapy. But Joe is like, forget it. I'm not doing that.
Is that a real thing?
Well, the condition is... I don't know about the regeneration therapy. I did not look into that. I'm guessing that's an advanced thing in the future.
You got to feel for Sisko here. The way Avery manages in this scene to give the impression of a guy who literally has the weight of the world on his shoulders, and then this on top of it.
Yeah, he does look like it's starting to get to him.
Yeah.
Back at Starfleet, and Falcon Crest and the adjunct bump into Odo doing some shapeshifting. Falcon Crest seems a bit hostile towards Odo, and eventually Odo grabs his arm and merges into him, revealing that the Admiral is a changeling. He says in a nasty tone, "Well done, Odo," and then knocks him down before turning into a bird and flying away. I had already assumed all these people were changelings, so I was not surprised by this. I just thought they were all changelings.
I thought it was good how Odo's managed to figure out how to do that merging trick thing. That's been done to him before. He's learned that one now.
I said that, remember, on one of the previous podcasts. I'm like, all Odo has to do is just, like, touch them and he can merge with them and know whether or not they're a changeling.
Right.
Well, now we go to the real Admiral, at least we think it's the real Admiral, and Sisko. Odo says he just had a feeling that something was wrong because he could feel the hostility from the fake Admiral.
Yeah.
The adjunct is annoyed that the changeling got onto the grounds, replaced the high-level official, and then he got off scot-free. So obviously they aren't doing enough. Admiral Falcon Crest complains that the current president doesn't really know how to behave in wartime, but he says humans will be willing to step up and fight to protect the paradise that they built.
Sisko mentions that maybe that hostility is because Odo's the only changeling who's ever harmed one of his own people.
Right.
I feel Odo at this point should basically say it wasn't my fault.
Yeah, it was an accident.
Yeah.
But I resent that they don't think that they harmed Odo. All of these people have harmed Odo, and they don't seem to think that that counts as ever harming another changeling. For example, in Heart of Stone, they are essentially torturing Odo to find out that he's in love with Kira. But they're not saying that that's harmful.
Oh.
I mean, baloney.
Feelings don't count, Kim. That's fine.
But yeah, exactly. Feelings definitely don't count to the founders.
Yeah. That's a good point.
No, they're jerks to him. They mistreat him all the time.
Right.
With emotional blackmail, but that doesn't count as harming Odo. Well, then Jake calls to say that Grandpa Joe has been arrested. So down to the restaurant we go, and we find that Joe hasn't really been arrested. He's just refusing to have his blood tested by some Starfleet people. Sisko tells him that the order for the blood tests came directly from him, and Jake and Sisko take the test to show that it's no big deal. Joe still refuses, and he starts chopping potatoes and ranting about his rights.
You can't go around making people prove who they say they are. That's no way to live. Those simplistic pre-9/11 world.
Yeah. Sisko says this isn't about you. It's about all the other families at all of the installations and starships. We can't secure those facilities if we aren't testing them. He says he can't skip testing his own family. Grandpa Joe points out that he didn't take an oath, and he says, we have rights. Sisko wants him to cooperate just for once. This is when you see it kind of all come together for Sisko, where he's like, I can only take so much crap from you, old man. And he just begs him, but the dude is too stubborn, and he will not comply.
Again, I would like to point out COVID is still happening. Did anyone get any vaccine vibes from Grandpa Joe?
Oh.
Well, especially when Sisko said, it's not about you. It's about all these other people that I'm trying to protect. And he's just like, I don't care, I have rights. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, it's very familiar.
This is one of those time capsule episodes where it's like, oh, isn't that a quaint view of the world?
But it's funny how relevant it is.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's been whole episodes of Deep Space Nine that you're like, was this written like a couple of weeks ago?
Past tense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one just felt like it was happening the moment when we recorded it.
Right.
Well, the lesson here, though, the really important lesson is don't cook angry, because of course Joe cuts himself while he's chopping vegetables. Sisko looks very carefully at the blood on the knife, and his dad is just furious about this. But Sisko wasn't sure what to think, with Joe being so difficult. Joe says you're seeing shapeshifters everywhere. He says if he were a shapeshifter, the first thing he'd do is absorb somebody's blood so he could ooze it out when somebody tested him, which is a thing that James has been saying for weeks.
Yeah, I was going to say, kudos to Joe Sisko for listening to the Way of the Warrior episode of this podcast.
Exactly. He's like, people find their way around everything, which is definitely true.
Yeah.
He gets very upset, and eventually he has some kind of attack falling to the floor. And I think we all saw that coming.
Right.
Later, Sisko is telling Odo his dad had a mild stroke, and that Jake is very upset by this. His father needs to take better care of himself. Odo kind of laughs and says, humanoids don't like to do what's best for themselves. Sisko agrees.
Lay off the speciesism again, Odo. When it comes to not murdering people and committing genocide and other atrocities, you shapeshifters don't exactly do that either.
It's like having a Ferengi lecture you on feminism.
Well, and in this scene, Sisko does say, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but there are times I wish you'd never found your people. And Odo agrees. You know, I think we could spend a lot of time talking about whether they're being racist, or we could talk about the fact that this would be a true challenge in reality with all of these different races and species coming together and trying to find a way to coexist. Yeah. This kind of thing would happen all the time.
Also, I don't know if speciesism is the right... I mean, I think we need to go further up. Like, are they a different phylum? Changelings and humanoids, or...
I wonder, what do you classify them as? Especially when Odo pointed out earlier that when they change into a rock, they scan as a rock. So they can modify not just their genetics, but their...
molecular structure?
Yes.
They're probably gods.
Well, the Jemadar certainly thinks so.
Somebody certainly thinks so. Yeah, I don't think so, because they're also jerks. Back to the restaurant with Joe and Jake, and the power goes out. It's also out at Starfleet, and Admiral Falcon Crest says Earth's entire power relay system is offline. Even Starfleet's emergency backups are offline. Sabotage, Odo says. Earth is defenseless.
I guess people in the future forget about localized, isolated battery backups?
Yeah, it seems unlikely that they could take out power for the entire planet.
Yeah, it does seem weird. I mean, story-wise, I understand why you're doing this, but just logistically, Iceland should be fine with all the geothermal power. And
there was the whole thing about, they were describing it almost like a virus, right? Like it was something that was jumping from system to system. And yeah, the whole thing was a little bit iffy.
Oh, if it's a computer virus. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are closed systems, I don't know.
Yeah, but we all know how vulnerable Starfleet
apparently, yes,
are to viruses.
That's true.
Somebody plugged into an open Ethernet port at Starfleet HQ and just shut everything down.
They had a security override module or whatever they were called in the first season.
Oh, it's Vantica.
It's Vantica.
So wait a minute. There's not a Ferengi somewhere that figured out if I infect all of Starfleet's computers with ransomware, I could make a killing.
Oh, you know the Ferengi would be totally on that one.
Well, that was a little bit like Quark's plan was in Little Green Men, right?
Start selling technology to the humans.
Yeah, but they would need to be less advanced than he was, which at least he would have had that advantage then.
And Rom would get cold feet because he always feels guilty about that kind of thing.
Well, as soon as somebody questioned him, he would cave. Now we go to the president, who is telling a group of people that we need to get the power back up ASAP. When Sisko, Odo, and Admiral Falcon Crest beam into his office using the runabout's transporters. Sisko advises him to declare a state of emergency, but this dude is like, no way. It's not like it's the Borg. Sisko says it's possible there is a Dominion fleet in the area because of the wormhole openings without any apparent reason. Perhaps cloaked ships were coming through. The Dominion could have taken the cloaking devices from the Cardassian and Romulan fleet that they destroyed last season.
So
I said at the beginning, why did we not think that that could have been happening right away?
did I miss something? Did the ability for the Jem'Hadar to cloak get retconned out when the Dominion seemed too powerful?
Yeah, it seems like it's a thing and then not a thing and then a thing again when they need it to be.
Holy cow, you're right.
Yep.
They could do it before. Yeah, why are we pretending like they can't? Oh my god, they forgot.
Yeah, they could walk through containment fields, they could beam through shields, they couldn't locate the Dominion ship that beamed the water off the station.
I totally forgot. Yeah, you are so right. Yeah, we've totally forgotten.
You could get around it, though, with the classic, well, they just adjusted their sensors so they were able to detect them.
Yeah, you could do that.
But I'm just remembering, and maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, that the Defiant can't go through the wormhole. Cloaked. And I'm trying to remember if the Obsidian Order Tal Shiar fleet went through cloaked.
No, they did not go through cloaked because it freaked Kira out.
So do we know, in fact, that cloaked ships can travel through the wormhole under cloak?
We do
But
not.
James's point is valid from the very first episode. Was it the camping episode?
Yes.
When we met the Jem'Hadar and the Vorta woman was on the station and then she just disappeared and beamed away.
They couldn't find the
They
ship.
didn't know that that ship had come through the wormhole. Right. So I think we've had some clues.
Agreed.
Yes, but that is a cloaking device that also the writers seem to have wrapped the ships in as well. So
yeah. I love a retcon to get the story moving.
Yep.
Well, the only way to get the power back online is to reset the grid, purge the operating systems, and restart the relays, and hope the dinosaurs don't eat you.
Nice. Hold on to your butts.
This could take days. Admiral Falcon Crest says, we have enough weapons and people to get a defense system up in the streets quickly. And the president is like, you're asking me to declare martial law. I love how someone always has to say this on TV shows. Sisko thinks armed troops in the street is a lot worse than a Jem'Hadar army landing and attacking without any resistance. This president is a little unsure of what to do, and Odo says people are huddled in the dark waiting for someone to tell them what to do. He says if you don't show them that they're not alone, then fear will surely take over. The president reluctantly grants Starfleet the authority to do what needs to be done.
They are playing so much on fear here. Well, I feel Leyton and Sisko are almost overplaying it.
But imagine if you underplayed it. If you look at Sisko's history with the Borg and what happened to him, are you surprised that he would react this way?
Okay, good point.
And it's entirely possible that Admiral Falcon Crest is actually using him to get what he wants because he knows that Sisko has that history.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is very innocent in this entire thing.
Gotcha.
Maybe Jake. Down at the restaurant, armed Starfleet personnel are beaming into the dark streets, and we have some dramatic music as Jake and Grandpa Joe peer through the window. To be continued. Well, James, overanalysis?
Okay. So the Klingons slew their gods a millennia ago. Does this mean that the Klingon gods were actually physically real and were slaughtered by Klingon warriors? Because a sufficiently advanced race to ancient people would look like gods. So were there aliens living on the Klingon homeworld, interfering in their affairs, perhaps acting like the Greek gods of mythology, and the Klingon warriors had enough of this at some point and slew them all?
The Greek gods supposedly mated with human women. So does that mean that the Greek gods
and men
were actually real?
And animals.
They particularly liked animals, yes.
Right. Right, so the Greek gods mated with humans and all other sorts of things that we know exist. Does that mean that the Greek gods were a real species that existed and was here?
I think that's a really good way to look at it because we've learned many times that the Klingons exaggerate stories.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance that they were actually maybe just Klingons, great warriors or something, but over the centuries, the stories got bigger and bigger until they were actually gods.
Yeah.
I got it. I know exactly what it is. So Discovery Klingons are quite a bit different than next gen and movie era Klingons. So maybe your Discovery Klingons, maybe those are the gods that you were envisioning.
Interesting idea. Also explaining the difference in physical looks.
Or maybe Klingons just like making stuff up.
Yeah. I think we know that Klingons like making stuff up. I think that is
It's an important part of their cultural makeup.
Yeah, because I think the thing about the Klingons in Discovery that we're supposed to believe is that at this point, the Klingons were just so separated from each other and there was no unity. And these were just specific houses that looked this way. That wasn't that all the Klingons looked this way.
Yeah.
I don't know that they were actually the gods.
Right, I'm just trying to make James happy.
Next thing. Has everybody forgotten about Beta Zeds?
Gosh, that's a good point.
Beta Zeds can read humans and a lot of other races.
Yeah.
Therefore, if you're scanning for changelings, having Beta Zeds would be useful because they would be able to spot this human doesn't read at all. There's a problem.
Okay.
But they said that that's not what happens. The founders, when they turn into something, they really turn into it and they scan as it. They take on all the characteristics. So I'm guessing that that means that they would take on something that would allow them to be read as humans.
Has Loaxon Troy on DS9 happened yet?
She's been on a few times.
Yeah, was she able to read Odo the same way she reads any other human?
They don't talk about her reading Odo. I don't remember that anyway.
I don't think she can. She points out she can't read Ferengi, but it's a good point. If they could do a complete duplicate of a human,
of an existing human,
would a Beta Z be able to read them?
Like Odo is just Odo. He's not replacing anyone.
Because he's not very good.
If somebody replaces a human, like when the changeling that's on Earth replaced Admiral Falcon Crest, was he able to reproduce all of his brain waves and everything as part of that replacement? I would imagine it's different when they're just trying to look like a human. But it's still a legitimate question. Have they tried something like that?
Especially as they have Odo to test on.
Yeah. And, I mean, Loaxana loves him, so...
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure she'd love to try to read him.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Loxana would get a lot of attention doing this, and she loves attention.
She does love attention, yeah. No, that's an interesting point that we haven't really explored.
Yeah. Next thing.
Yeah.
So Joe Sisko points out how a changeling could absorb some blood from a victim and then squirt it out on command. What happens to that blood when the changeling needs to regenerate? Or do the really good changeling even need to regenerate like Odo does?
I guess I had assumed that they did, and they would just put that little blood into a little bowl next to their buckets. Pick it up in the morning.
Okay.
Sorry to spoil a bit, but owing to what we see later on in the series, we know even high-level changelings need to regenerate.
Following on from this, surely in the future DNA testing could be very quick as well. So if that changeling just outputted some blood, do a DNA test on it. Does it match the person that they are pretending to be?
Yeah.
So they would have to have had the blood from that person. Plus, if I remember correctly, blood oxidizes over time relatively quickly. So they would have to be able to keep the blood in a perfectly chilled temperature or the blood would break down. So you'd start seeing the breakdown when you were testing it. I feel it's a good idea, but overall it's flawed and there'd be ways to detect it.
Probably true.
There's ways around everything. That's what Grandpa Joe said.
So what you're saying is it just really needs to work enough for them. It doesn't have to be flawless.
Right.
Well, listen, we know that changelings don't hold their shape well when subjected to low-level phaser fire. So let's just stun everyone, and then whoever turns into a pile of jelly, like we got him.
That's right.
Okay.
Just like every hour on the hour. Just
start stunning people. Ow.
Just stun everybody.
Okay, I like that.
I mean, that might be a little invasive.
As you can probably spot, I am obsessed about trying to track down the shapeshifters. I think my final point here have they considered using dogs or cats?
Yeah, I thought about dogs.
I mean, you can use dogs with Terminators.
No, I thought about that too, because dogs can detect so many things. This is a good example of something I bet they would be able to detect.
Maybe, but we don't know how changeling sense organs work. So they may be able to hit all the markers that a dog would be able to sense anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. Dogs are pretty good at that kind of thing. It would have been worth trying, at least.
I guess part of the problem is, with all this testing, Odo isn't in the top tier of changelings with ability to imitate things.
Right.
He has all these basic characteristics, but he can't do an absolutely perfect human, which I would see as probably the biggest problem when you're trying to test these things.
And I bet there's lots of people in Starfleet who don't believe that about Odo.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think my final thing.
Your final?
The president uses this phrase paradise, but I think the realities of places like Deep Space Nine show that this is very much an illusion. They're living in this walled garden of perfection, and the people out on the edges, on the reality of the universe, of the galaxy, are living in the real world. I get this real Rome, ancient Rome vibe here, that you have this city that is living, if you like, in make-believe of this paradise, and that's Earth.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That seems accurate to me.
But it still is paradise.
Right. Just because there's bad stuff going on doesn't mean paradise isn't paradise.
It's a false paradise. I feel it's almost...
No, it's not. It's not. If you're living in it, it's still paradise.
That's true.
It's like privileged people today, or people with a lot of money, right? Their recognition of the world is very different from someone who can't find a job and can't buy food for their family, but they're still both living in reality.
But it's morally bankrupt that you would ignore.
Well, yes, that's true.
The world.
Yeah. That's not what you said. Yeah, that's true.
So you guys are all okay with...
As long as I'm living on Earth, I'm okay with it, sure.
Yeah, if you're the one benefiting from the paradise, you're less likely to see it.
Oh my gosh.
It's a little bit different from what I was talking about, because people like Grandpa Joe, for example, he is living his best life, right? He's not struggling to find the resources to keep his restaurant open. Somehow, magically, he has wait staff and people who help him, even though he doesn't pay anybody.
Yeah.
But from his perspective, nobody tells him what to do. He does whatever he wants. He gets everything he needs. He doesn't have any problems.
He can pursue the dream of being the best possible chef he could be.
Right. And he says something about, this is where I belong. He has found his world and he's happy in it, and everything to him is perfect there. And as soon as something started poking at his paradise, he went a little ballistic. But I can see why it's different, because he doesn't have any kind of awareness for anything else off-world because he's never left it.
Yeah.
He's only lived in this paradise.
I guess there'd probably be a lot of people like that.
Yeah, most people.
I think it's probably that way on most of the big Federation worlds.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it would have to be. Otherwise, why would you join it?
Why would you sign up? Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If I'm just signing up to go and bleed for other people, I'm not trying to join a military organization, or I'm not trying to join the Peace Corps. I'm trying to join paradise.
I'm worried by that because I see it should be more like the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
I would see the Federation as wanting to be more altruistic.
Well, if you looked at it like everybody's supposed to be so much more evolved and they want everybody else to be that evolved and they're caring about other people. But I don't know. They lie about it by having this nonsensical prime directive, which just means we can't help people. That's just pretty much what that means. So I don't know. I think we've built our paradise and we're happy in it.
We can selectively help people.
Only if we like them or they're good looking.
Oh, so it is modeled on reality. Yeah.
That's how it goes on TV.
And with that, I'm going to finish being a complete downer on the Federation.
People living in harmony and just being happy. Just James wants to tear it all down. That's just no.
What's your problem with harmony, man?
What a stereotypically English perspective.
Well, Attiba, do you have any overanalysis to share?
I do not. I think James covered just about all of my thoughts. I do have a grand unified theory for why all admirals are jerks, But I think I'll wait until after the next episode. That's what we call in the biz foreshadowing.
Teaser.
That's good. That's going to get people wanting to listen to the next one for the grand unified theory.
Well, I only have 2 points in my overanalysis, and one was that Sisko's dad was written a little bit like a stereotype, but the guy is such a good actor that it wasn't too hard to believe, I guess. I thought he played it well.
There were aspects of that which were horribly real.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing I had was that it just made little sense to me that with everything that we've been preparing for, we didn't take it a little bit more seriously that wormhole was opening and closing, and we didn't know why. Why didn't we have ships out there? Why weren't we actually trying to look into it? Why didn't we put up one of those sensor nets that we put up on TNG to detect cloaked ships? I mean, it's like we're all just looking out the window going, I don't know. I didn't buy that.
It took a number of ships in TNG to set up that sensor net.
Yeah.
This might come down to your issue, Kim, of they only have so many resources, and maybe they couldn't get enough Starfleet ships in there.
But they have Bajor and even Cardassia. They also would be interested if there was somebody sneaking into the quadrant. I don't know. I didn't buy it.
Yeah, but you got to remember that the wormhole is technically in Bajoran space, and I don't know how happy the Bajorans would be about just having a fleet of Starfleet ships hanging out, around their planet, especially a planet where they just threw off an invasion.
Right.
And they might not want to send out ships to put up a sensor net to prove that it's not profits.
Ooh.
So they might not want to be involved. But I still felt like we should have tried harder.
Yeah, we've also established Bajoran ships are not the greatest anyway. So
True.
To quote Kai Wynn, blasphemy.
Oh my God.
Let's not quote Kai Wynn, please.
Oh man, we haven't seen her yet this season. I'm missing her.
I do not miss her. That's great.
Blasphemy. No, come on. She's great. I've had to put up with Gul Dukat at least 2 times.
I do want to point out, this is not really an overanalysis, but it's more of like a shout out, a kudos to this show. And one of the reasons why I love DS9 is because you do get to see, even in 1996, it was very unusual to see multi-generational African-American men just being fathers, sons, and that whole dynamic and that whole relationship. Even though it did ring a little bit stereotypical still, it was nice to see that level of care taken to show that aspect of Sisko. Whereas you could have very easily just made this completely like Starfleet focused and completely like politically focused, but to take sort of a more family arena, I think was a really smart choice.
No, I would totally agree with that. And I think the stereotype part of it wasn't really about race. It was more like your little old granddad.
No, that's what I mean. Like a stereotypically curmudgeonly older.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, let's move to women in the future. I don't have a lot to say. I like the little part with Kira being disappointed that the prophets weren't making themselves known. I thought that was pretty on brand for her, that she doesn't say anything about it. She doesn't make a big deal about it, but she's got her eye on it, And then when it seemed like it had stopped, she was like, oh, I was kind of hoping for something else. I thought that was very Kira.
I've loved the way in the season they've slowly built her faith. They really almost kind of avoided it earlier on. And now we've reached this point where you see almost regularly what an important part of her life it is.
Yeah, it started with Destiny.
Yeah.
And it's grown since then. I have absolutely no idea what is up with Dax and this ridiculous trick that she's playing on Odo. That doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't ring necessarily true for that character even. I don't get it. I'll wait and see if they explain it a little bit more in the next episode, but that seemed a little bit dopey. And then the only other female character was Dr. Brahms, or the adjunct, whatever her name was in this show. She wasn't really well explored, but she seemed capable at her job, and nobody sexually harassed her, so I have no complaints.
If she'd carried a phaser with her, she could have shot the changeling.
Yeah, I did think about that. Why didn't anybody shoot at the changeling or do anything? They just let him fly away. And she bent down to see if Odo was okay. Odo only fell over. It's not like anything terrible happened to him. But yeah, she paid no attention to the changeling running away and then flying off.
I was surprised that arguably at a time of emergency, why they weren't carrying personal sidearms.
That's true. With an increased threat level, why is nobody carrying a sidearm?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I guess Paradise again.
Paradise.
Yeah.
Gosh, yeah. I forget about that. I keep on putting the real world into Star Trek.
I don't know what Star Trek you're watching. There's not a lot of real world involved. Well, let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. Attiba, let's start with you.
There's a thumbs up for me. I think it really starts diving into the paranoia and more of the threat level rising that you're going to feel the rest of this season.
Right.
So,
okay, James.
Absolute thumbs up. Great episode. It's almost scary how this episode is still both current and predictive.
Well, I give it a thumbs up too. Not a lot really happened in this episode. You could feel it was kind of building towards something. I still enjoyed it. It was a little bit creepy how it tied into current events, like past tense, but it still gave a good sense of this impending doom. And the really surprising thing to me in this episode was Odo. I liked how he talked to Miles and Julian. I like how he uncovered that changeling really quickly, but I really like that speech that he gave the president. I mean, it showed empathy, which is not something that we saw a lot of from Odo in the early days. So, you're really seeing the growth from this character. I'm not sure in seasons 1 or 2, Odo would have been the one giving that speech. It would have been somebody else. So I like how they're developing that character. So I'm really looking forward to the next episode. I have completely avoided watching it. I'm ready to go. I'm gonna go watch it later today because I need to know what's coming next.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up is data. Not data from Next Gen, but actual data from the ratings of the episodes. In the first 10 episodes of each season, this is how many thumbs up I gave. So in season 1, I gave 4 thumbs up. In season 2 and 3, I gave 6. In season 4, out of 10 episodes, I've given 9 thumbs up. And by the way, James has given, in this season, 2 neutrals and 1 thumbs down. So he has a lot more negative reviews than I have in this season. So, I mean, let's keep it up, Star Trek. Come on. Because what has happened in all of the other seasons is that we sort of started high and then it quickly dipped. But so far, so good. I'm really happy with this season. I think my only complaint really about this season is it's been a little light on Kira. Maybe that's because we brought in Worf, and so now we have another character, but there hasn't been a ton of Kira in this season yet.
Yeah, everybody's kind of getting their wings clipped to make room for Worf there.
Yeah, I think so.
Not to mention the fact that pretty much every other episode this season kind of suffers because they spent all the money on Way of the Warrior, so...
I see. Yeah, there's only so much budget to go around.
Right.
Okay, that is it for season 4, episode 10. Come back next week for episode 11 and the second part of this 2-parter. Attiba, you want to give any plugs for your artwork or your podcast? You can see my art, as always, at my website, attibaroyster.com, and you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at AttibaK, ATTIBAK. Also, you can check out me and my brother's podcast, Teebs and Kid Phoenix Versus. That's on all the usual channels, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Pandora. Yeah, just look for Teebs and Kid Phoenix Versus. We're currently on hiatus, but we will be coming back soon. There's still plenty of content for you to take in there.
There's a lot of nerd culture to go.
And James was a guest on the last 2 episodes.
Yes, James did help us out a lot on our season 1 finale, and that was a lot of fun. And we're looking forward to having him back when we discuss, I don't know, World War I in film, whatever we're doing.
Oh, man.
Oh, we could go history nerdy. Yeah, I'm down with that.
So in the meantime, if you'd like to tell us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, please email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. Check us out on talkthroughmedia.com. You can leave feedback for individual episodes there, and you can listen to the other podcasts on our network, like James's and my new podcast, Star Trek Prodigy, a Rebingeit podcast. But never fear, we won't give up on this podcast until we've gotten all the way through the show.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
That's it for me.
And that's it for me.